All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So I'm David Bowman. I'm the Executive Director of the Four Rivers Education Cooperative, Regional Education Cooperative up here in New Mexico. And this is actually part 2 of a short series that we're doing around Excel and data and pulling data out of Excel so we can actually make good decisions based on it. If you are interested in the first training that we did, it is available on our website. If you go to our section on the State Technology Initiative, TechBits trainings, you'll find it there. And it should also be posted on the Region 9 TechBits and TechBits page as well. So there's a couple different places where you can pick up the first video. So this session is basically designed to take a look at the hacks, the techniques that we used in the first session, and then take them to the next level. Basically, we looked at a handful of strategies for pulling information out of data in some ways that just really make that very simple to do. I'm going to do a quick review of those strategies, and then we're going to apply them in a couple of different ways. And we're going to sort of go to the next step in those 4 skills there. So that's what today looks like. But let me take a moment and just walk through the Excel hacks, I guess you could call them, that we went over last time, and then we're going to start using them in this session here. So the 4 things that we went over last time were how to create named ranges and their value, how to do count if and count ifs, sum product and average if and average if, which are 3 different ways that we can get specific information out of a data set that meets the criteria and answers the questions we're trying to answer. So I'm going to walk through some examples on those, and then we're going to use them in some new ways. So the very first thing that I do when I'm looking at data, just to make it easy, is I name my ranges, because it's too hard to always keep referring back to various this cell and that cell and here and there, but we can give them their own names. And that is the first thing that I do in pretty much every case to make it easy to get information. So let me just, since this is review, let me just go ahead and do that. I'm going to select this range here. I'm going to give it a name. We'll call this STD student sex, male or female. Oops, so we've now given that a name. I'm going to give this bunch a name here also. We're going to call this SPED, and I'm going to call this range of cells here, instead of calling it E5 through E16, we're going to call this absences. All right. So, you can always get to your named ranges once you've declared a name for a range up here under the name field. And if you click on a name, it's going to automatically select that set of data. So let's use that a bit. And maybe make sure I spelled that correctly. All right, so that was the first thing we did. We talked about how to create named ranges, and I've just demonstrated that again. So let's walk through each of the formulas, each of the techniques that we used last time in order to answer questions. So the first one is count if, and that's, in a nutshell, how many times does something show up in your data? What's the number of instances? And let me just get it in here, count if. So my question is, how many special education students? Excel is telling me I need to include the range, which I've given a name. I've called it SPED. And what I'm looking for is the actual word SPED. Now remember, with words, they need to be in quotation marks, right? So Excel doesn't think it's a cell reference. It doesn't think it's a number. It knows that, okay, this is a word, but that's what we're looking for. So count if, so counting in the range SPED, count if the word, how many times the word SPED shows up. 5. All right. And we can actually do this in reverse also. And this is actually going to be something new. So we know that we can always say, X equals something, male, let's say, right? But how do you say we're looking for something which does not equal. Well, you think about the logic of it. If something is less than a number or less than a value, or it's greater than a value, it cannot equal that value, right? Because it's less than it or more than it. It turns out this is the symbol for not equal to in Excel. So if we're looking for something which is not equal to something else, it's going to be that less than greater symbol, less than greater than symbol that we use. So let's use that. So count if, and I'm looking in the range sped, and I'm looking for something which is either less than or equal than the word sped, or not equal to the word sped. And there's 7 non-sped students. So that's actually kind of a new thing. We didn't do that last time, but how do you say something is not equal? That's how you do it. But that's only looking for one criteria, right? In each of those cases, count the number of times a specific criteria comes up. Count ifs allows us to use more than one criteria. And I know I'm going a little quick, but this is review from the last time, and also because we're going to be using these formulas, these techniques for the rest of the session. So we're going to see them a lot. So count ifs. So now we can have more than one criteria, and it's going to be set up the same way. What range, what criteria? Another range, what are we looking for? Another range, what are we looking for? And you can do up to 9 criteria, I believe. So how many sped boys? So we're going to look in student sex in that range there. And the criteria I'm looking for is male. Then my next range I'm going to look in, sped, and the criteria I'm looking for is the word sped. So we have 3 sped boys in this data set here. And we could do the same thing with girls. Equals count ifs, first range, student, sex. We're looking for female this time. Second range, sped. We're looking for the word sped. Oops. And why did that not do it? Oh, student. There we go. I should have had a clue, because if you'll notice, once you have correctly entered the name of a named range, it does change the color in the formula, and in your data set, it'll go ahead and highlight that section also. So that's just a nice little flag that tells me, yeah, I have entered it correctly, and Excel knows what it is. So when I made the error, and I've had students, it didn't change the name in the formula, and it didn't show up in the data either. So I should have seen that clue. All right. So that was counting if and counting ifs, and that just gives a number of cases that meet the criteria. But the second one, sum product, is going to look at a variety of criteria and give me the value that that criteria represents. So if I'm looking for the number of absences, I don't want to know how many times we see sped boys in the data. I want to know the value that each of those is going to represent. So I want to be able to add up all of their absences. So we did that quite a lot in the first session, actually, but it's sum product, and we always start with the parenthesis. But then remember, each criteria that we're looking for also needs its own set of parentheses. So there's another parenthesis. The first thing we're looking for is student sex, and we want to see, is it or is it not equal to male? That's the first criteria. It's embedded within its own set of parentheses times. And as it looks across the line, of course, if the criteria is met, it assigns it a value of 1. And if it's not met, it assigns a value of 0. All right, so the next one we're looking for, so now we're also looking for sped equals the word sped. And as it goes across, if it finds that, it's going to be a value of 1 or 0. And once we have met those criteria, what do we want to know? Now, multiply by the number of absences. So As it looks across each line, it's going to go across line 5, line 6, then line 7. It's going to do that multiplication. It's going to look under student sex. If it's M, give it a value of 1. If it keeps going across and it finds in the column the range sped, if it finds the word sped, give it a value of 1. So now we have 1 times 1. And then what's left? Now simply multiply by the value in absences. So if the value in absences is 5, it's going to be 1 times 5. So for that line, the value, the product is 5. Then it goes through all the lines of the data, adds up all the products, and gives you a total. This one's kind of the same, but we'll do it again. Sum product. So it's student sex equals female F. The next one times sped equals, see, this is not sped. Students, so it does not equal the word sped. And there's our doesn't equal again. And then times absences and close it off. So female non-sped girls, total absences 13. So that's sum product. Remember, the important thing is it's going to do it line by line, and it's going to multiply across. When it meets, when the first criteria is met, it's a value of 1. Second criteria value, the criterion is met, times 1, and then times the value that we're trying to add up. And then average if, of course, same, very similar to count and count if. So average if, we're going to be establishing, based on some criteria that we need, what numbers should we be averaging up? Average the numbers if it meets a certain criterion. So what do we have? We have average absences from male students. So the range, as it's telling me on Excel, where am I looking for the criterion? And we're going to look in the range student sex. What am I looking for? I am looking for male. And then if the criteria are met, where are the values that we're trying to average? And it's going to be in the column absences. So the nice thing is, and this is a point that I just can't say enough, you can always do this by hand. And with a sample set of this size, which is pretty small, it's probably easy to do. But if you want to ensure that it's accurate, because doing things by hand is always going to be risky. If you want to ensure that it's accurate, let Excel do the work. And if you have a lot of lines of data, the chances of making errors just grows and grows and grows. And the time also grows, right? When in fact, if we let Excel do it, it's going to be correct and it's going to be fast. Save a lot of time, make sure the information is accurate. So that's average if. But that's only based on one criterion, like in this case, male students. Just like count ifs, if we want more than one criterion, we have to use average ifs. Average ifs. Now, we're going to string all the criterion along in a moment, but the first thing Excel wants to know is, once we've met all the criteria, where are the numbers that we're averaging? What is the average range? Absences. And you can probably see how useful it is to have these named ranges. If I ever need to go back and check the formula, like what is this doing, right? What is it calculating? I don't have to wonder, well, what's E5 through E16? Well, it's the absences, right? It also makes the formulas very, very easy to write because I simply use real words to represent what do I want. All right, so now our criteria range. You know, Excel always gets me. It says criteria range, but it should be criterion range. But everything else works amazingly well, so I will give them a pass. So what are we looking for? Female sped. So student sex, we are looking for female. What's the next criterion? In the range SPED, what's the criterion we're looking for in that range? We're looking for the word SPED. So in nothing flat, as soon as I hit my enter key, I'm going to have my answer, and it's going to be correct. That's actually kind of an interesting little conclusion there. Now, if I were looking at this from more of an evaluative standpoint or more of a research standpoint, I'm going to look at female non-SPED students. I'm going to look at male and SPED and non-SPED, and I'm going to look for any kind of trends or any kind of differences between those groups. But for the sake of just taking a few moments to run through the techniques, hopefully this has done it. But like I said, if you want a much fuller discussion on creating named ranges, using COUNTIF, sum product, and average if, I strongly recommend you go back and look at that prior video because we spent a lot of time walking through this. So those are the 4 things we're going to be using today. And we're going to take each of those to a slightly more advanced level, and most importantly, find some ways to represent these data and be able to communicate them efficiently and in a kind of a user-friendly format. Because right now it's just questions, numbers, but how do we communicate this information? How do we aggregate it together so that we can start actually looking across questions, across data, and coming up with some real information? So let's do that. Okay, so what we are looking at here are numbers for student counts, special ed, ELL. Let me make it a little bigger. Free and reduced lunch. These are the actual numbers that were published by the New Mexico Public Education Department based on the 40-day count from the last school year, with one caveat. This one down here, private and public, completely ignore that one. I just picked some schools at random, called them private, because I think we're going to get to a question down here that deals with that. These are all public schools. So everything else are the actual numbers they gave us except for that. So just in case you're wondering where these data came from and what they mean, now you know. So when I am pulling up my spreadsheets and I'm start looking at data, obviously I've got a pretty strong grasp of how to figure out this and how to figure out that, and it goes pretty quickly. I tend to spend a lot of time just cleaning up the data because I have to think ahead. Well, what questions am I going to be answering? What formulas will I be using? What am I trying to find out? And then I have to look at the data and say, is there anything in the data which is going to prevent those techniques from working? Or is there anything in there which is going to basically break Excel so it can't give me the information that I want? So data cleanup is kind of a big part of the task. And but there's some very simple ways to go about it, and I'm going to show you one. Because right now, as I look at these numbers, I see that we have all these asterisks in here. I'm actually sure if that's the right name, but asterisks in here. Well, if I am going to start calculating the numbers or the values, asterisks are not numbers, they're not values. So so that's going to cause the formulas to fail. So I know that I need to do a little bit of cleanup here to get rid of those. I'm going to be looking at, how many students in special ed, how many are getting free and reduced lunch, and it's going to try to run some numbers for me, but those aren't numbers. So that's a problem. Well, I could simply scroll through this, find every asterisk, put a 0 in its place. But I have 956 lines of data here. There's no way I'm going to do that by hand, right? That would be just craziness. And who's got that time? And if I miss one, it goes nuts at that point. Fortunately, I don't have to. I can let Excel, and in this case, Microsoft Word, do it for me. So I can just pull up my find and replace menu, and I can say, find an asterisk, replace it with a 0. It's not going to work. And the reason why it's not going to work is in Excel, an asterisk is the symbol for a wildcard. An asterisk can represent anything and everything. So if I say find next, found the next one, but look what it found now. It found the 30. Well, a 30 is not an asterisk, right? But it's a thing, and I'm looking for a wildcard, which could be anything. So it's not going to work on Excel. Fortunately, however, there's a very easy little trick for extracting that from Excel. Excel can't do it, but Microsoft Word can. So I'm going to take 15 seconds, 30 seconds. I'm going to clean all 956 lines of data at once. So I've got it selected, all of it. I've got it copied. I'm simply going to paste it into Microsoft Word. It's 32 pages, right? But we're gonna let the program do the work for us. In Microsoft Word, I can look for an asterisk and replace it with something else. So find an asterisk, replace it with a 0. And I'm going to say replace all. It has just made 675 replacement, and my data are now cleaned up. So let me just copy this back again. I'm going to just grab the whole table, copy it. See, where did I actually start? With the headings, I'm going to go to my first heading, paste it, and my data are now cleaned up. It's a little quirk of Excel that, with a wildcard thing, but we do have another tool at our disposal that can do it just as fast for us. So my data are cleaned up and they are ready to go. All right, so we know that we need to name our ranges. So let's do that lickety split. Here's our districts. I'm going to highlight the entire column, and this is going to be districts. We know that we're going to need male students. So let me highlight that entire range of male students. I'm going to just call it males. We know we need female students, so I'm going to highlight all of that. I'm going to name that females. I know I'm going to need SPED, so let me highlight that. SPED. Oops. Oh, now look at that. I tried to name that range, that highlighted group, SPED, but I already gave that name to a different range of data. So when I typed it in up here, instead of giving it a name, I said, well, let's just go to that range that already has that name. You cannot have more than one. You can't use a name more than once in your Excel workbook. And it doesn't matter which sheet it's on. If it's in that workbook, you can only use it one time. So what does that tell us? That tells us that I need to give this a different name. So I'm going to call it spec underscore ed. Why not, right? And just to remind myself what I called it, I'm going to put it up here in the column header. Don't need to do it, but I find it really useful because sometimes if you have a lot of named ranges, sometimes it's hard to remember what they all are. So I just go ahead and name the column. Okay, let's take care of ELL. And let's take care of giving this a name also, FRL, free and reduced lunch. Okay. So we have our data cleaned up. We have named all of the ranges that we're going to be needing for our formulas. So let's start putting them into place. Okay, so over here on the right-hand side, I've just grabbed a few districts, a few of the districts kind of at random. And I want to know how many students, males, females, sped, and so on for each of them. Now, here's the interesting thing. In the data set, we see every school is listed. And the first column is telling me what the name of the district is, right? So I've got a student count for Academy del Sol. I've got a student count for Alamogordo High, one for Buena Vista, and so on like that. I want to know the total students across all of those, which means I need to get the student count for each one. So I need the district, that's a criterion, and I need the student count represented by each of those schools. I need to add them up. Well, that sounds a lot like some product to me. How many students meet the criteria of being in a school within Alamogordo? So when we get down to males and females and special ed and so on, we're going to be using some product. But the first thing I'm looking for is just how many schools are there? So that's just how many times does it show up? So every time the district shows up in the data, it's a different school. So the number of times the district shows up is going to be equal to the number of schools. That's just counting. So COUNTIF is the one that I need. What is the range I'm looking for? Districts. In the range districts, how many times does Alamogordo show up? I'm going to make this easy on myself because I want to repeat this multiple times. I want to do for Alamogordo and Albuquerque and Berlin and so forth. I don't want to have to write the formula every single time. Now, for all of these, I know I need to look in the districts, but what am I looking for? I could type in Alamogordo, and then I could type the next one and the next one and the next one. No, I'm not going to do it. What I'm looking for is whatever is over here in the L column. Look in districts, which is that named range, and find me something that matches what's over here in the L column. It shows up 16. There's 16 schools in Alamogordo. Now, that was simple. I only had to do it one time, but I've got a bunch of schools here. I want that same formula to go all the way down. Look in the same range, but find what's over there to the left in column L. I'm going to highlight down. I'm going to do Control D, which is take whatever's at the top and fill it down to each of the cells below it. So Control D means take it and fill all the cells down, D for down. And in nothing flat, I've got an accurate count of all the schools in each of those districts there. And it's correct. Very, very simple. Okay, so that's just counting, right? So the next one, total students. So it's not how many times the school shows up. I need a number, and I need to add up all those numbers. So that's going to be my sum product. I need to be able to establish some criteria and then come up with a value for each applicable line of my data. And that's going to be my sum product. So what's the first array that I'm looking in? I'm looking in. So this is total students over here. We're only looking for one criterion, but I want not the number of times a district shows up, but the value that's represented by each line in which the district shows up. And that's going to be sum product. So my first criterion is going to be in the named range districts, right? And what am I looking for? If the value there is equal to Alamogordo. I'm not going to put in Alamogordo. I don't care what it is. I'm not referring to the name. I'm referring to whatever's in column L. So if something in the range districts equals what we have in that other cell over there, give it a 1 for yes or a 0 for no. And then I'm only looking for one thing. I only have one criterion, but where's the value I'm trying to add up? It's over there under student count. So I just student count. So when we meet for every line that meets the criteria of district equals, in this case, Alamogordo, count up the value, or in this case, count up the number of students. Go through every single line of data like that. When you're done, add them all up together. And what have you got? 5,581 students in Alamogordo. I am not going to do this by hand, especially if I have to do a bunch of districts. I'm going to do it, and I'm only going to write the formula in there one time. Control D to fill down. I now have an accurate student count, and these are the real numbers, by the way. An accurate student count for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is that 8 districts? Yep. All 8 districts or student counts have been added up and displayed. Very, very simple. So that's with one criterion, which is just how many kids in Alamogordo schools. So let's do it with 2 criteria. Sum product district equals whatever's, districts equals whatever's over there in column L. Close it. Now our next criterion, if it's a yes, then it gets a value of 1. Our next one is, actually, we only need 1 for this one too. Males. Let's change this. Let's say males in private schools within each of those districts. So males in private schools, because I want to get 2 criterion in there. 2 criteria, excuse me. All right, so equals sum product districts equals whatever's over there. And I want to know if they're public or private. I need to name that range equals private, because this is going to fail, but it's an easy fix, times how many males. Now, why is this failing on me? Well, let's look at the formula. Let me just make it big here. Right here, I'll paste it in here. Okay, so here's what it looks like. And here's why it's going to fail. So we've got a named range, districts, and it's referring to, in this case, Alamogordo. We've got a range private, and we're looking for the word private, and then some value in males. So it's going to, if the district is correct, it's going to give it a 1. If the value in the range private is private, it gives it another 1. So 1 times 1 times the number of males. Or if the district isn't correct, it's 0. If it is a private, that's a 1. So 0 times 1 is 0. And then times the number of males. So it's going to be 0 again. But why did it fail? It failed because it's trying to look in a range called private. And that range has not yet been named. If I look up here under my list of named ranges, there's nothing up there called private. We need to do that. So let's do it. As soon as I name this range, suddenly Excel will know what to do with that formula and will be able to calculate an answer for us. Now, sum product districts is L3. we are looking for private, and we are looking for males. Now, there is one possibility here. So it's still failing. So instead of saying value, like we don't even know where to look, it's saying NA, which means there's no possible answer to that problem. It could be an issue of there is simply none available, or the named range isn't long enough. One of the key things around naming ranges, and we're going to fix it, is each of those ranges has to be the same size. So for example, with district name, the range goes all the way down to 956. For males, it's going to go all the way down to 956. Let's take a look at the range called private. Oh, look at that. It only goes down to 233, which means that formula is going to work. I mean, it's going to go through line by line by line by line. It's going to go all the way through 233. But when it gets to 234, it can find a district. It can find the number of males, but there's no value in there for private or public. It fails because the ranges are not the same size. That's why I couldn't calculate it. So we need to fix that. And we're going to fix that by looking at something called the name manager. When I go up to formulas, right in the middle, I see something called name manager. Now, just so I can look, the last line here is 956. Okay. So when I click on name manager, here's all of my named ranges over here. And it tells me what they're referring to, where are they basically. So let's take a look at private. It tells me it's the sheet enrollment data. It starts at D3 and it goes down to D233, which is not correct. It needs to go down to 956. Now I can do one of two things. I can just click in there, backspace, put in the correct number. That would work. Or I could just delete that named range, manually select the entire set of data all the way down to 956, and then give it a name again. Because if I delete the name, I'm able to use the name again. But in this case, since the problem is easy, 956. Do you want to save the change? Yes. And now my formula works. And I can just run it down for the other ones also. I see there's a couple zeros over here. So that, and I think we don't need to go through the other ones. Female, sped, ELL, free and reduced. It's going to be, I'll do one. It's going to be the same. So females is going to be districts, equals some product, districts equals that, and give me the value of females. And there it is right there. Very simple and very accurate, which I like. And it'd be the same for SPED, ELL, and free and reduced lunch. So you'll notice though, in this one right here, we have two criteria, districts and the value in private also. I'm pretty sure you can do up to 9 different criteria. So if you've got a lot of columns and you've got a lot of parameters, I want people who meet this, meet this, and so forth. I think you can actually string up to 9 criteria within your sum product. So you can really narrow down very sharply on the specific answer, the specific value that you're trying to find for your question. Now, for the second time, let me take this and make it even easier, right? So maybe in a case like this, you want to do, leave all of your students here and you've got their absences and you want to know, whatever the case may be, or you're looking for the absences of your students or number of assignments or scores or test results. And you can put your students down the side, find the test result for this. First test at this particular time on the English language arts assessment for the 5th grade students in Miss Wilson's class, and so on like that. And you can come up with, bang, there's your answer using that very simple technique. But one of the things that I often find myself doing is just trying to answer very specific questions. I don't want to know about everybody. I want to know about one person. I don't want to know about all the districts in this case. I only want to find out about one district. So I don't need to build something like this. I mean, it's very nice for presenting information, but sometimes I just want an answer. I just want to know one district. I want to know one teacher. I want to know one student. I want to know one thing in order to answer it. And there's a nifty way to do that. We're going to skip that. I'm going to build one line that's going to allow me to put in whatever, in this case, whatever district I'm interested in. And it's pretty simple. So we're going to be doing something called data validation. Now, I've already created a list of all the districts or charter schools or whatnot. So even though I've got 956, 955 schools in that list, I don't have that many. There aren't that many because there's all the repeats, right? So how many do I actually have? 148. Okay. And I have named that set, that range, as district underscore names. Aha. So I've got it all tucked away over here in a different sheet, and I've given it a name. We can use that. Now I am going to do something called data validation. Like, data validation basically means in a specific cell, what can you put there? Does it have to be a number? Does it have to be a date? Does it have to be text? Does it have to be, can it be anything you want? Or in this case, can it be a list? And if so, what are the valid items for that list? So I'm up here on the data tab, and somewhere up there it is, just to the right of center, I've got something called data validation. What is allowed to go into that cell? Any value, whole numbers, decimals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the items is list. We can put an entire list into that one cell. What is the source of that list? Now, let's say I wanted just a yes, no, like mark something as yes, mark something as no. I can just put in there yes, comma, no. That's the whole list right there. But I have this named range somewhere else with all the names already in it. And that is called district names. So what is allowed to go into this? The entire list or the entire set of values within the named range district names. Okay. And now I have a pull down menu with all of my districts in it. Now, something that is a limitation of Excel. You can only see 8 at a time. So 21st, Albuquerque, Aces, Alamogordo, Albuquerque, etc. You can only see 8 at a time. So maybe a bit of scrolling is necessary, but it's going to work. Okay, so let's choose a different. Let's see if we can find a shorter one. There's my Alamogordo. So I'm going to take those same formulas, count if districts, criteria is whatever's over there. And I'm even going to make this a bit simpler using another named range. I could say in my formulas, like I did above, find something that meets that cell over there. So in this case, it's L21. Whatever is L21, that's what we're looking for. But if I have to go back and look at my formulas, I want to know what they mean. Like, what is it doing, right? So instead of calling that L21, go back and look at L21, I'm going to give that cell a name also, just by itself. And this is going to be called target underscore district. That cell is now called target district. So in my formula, count if, we're going to look in districts, and we're looking for target district. If I can type. Look in districts, find the target district. 16. Let me do these very quickly. So this needs to be some product, because we're actually looking for the value, not just how many times it shows up. Some product, districts equals the target district, and give me the student count. Okay, let me just bang in a couple of other ones here right quick, and then we'll see how it works. So some product, districts equals the target district. You know, I do a lot of budget spreadsheets. One number that seems to always change is what is the mileage reimbursement rate, right? So, or what is the salary for a particular type of position, or how many positions? So when I've got a variable like that, I put it one time, one place on the spreadsheet, and I give it a name. So for all the formulas that depend on it, I don't have to go back and find it and say, go back to this other sheet and click on the cell. I just give it a name, rate or mileage rate, right? And the nice thing is, so let's say I have to do that 15 times across the spreadsheet. So I've got to refer back to that in some way. Not only do I not have to go back and find it each time, I can just put in mileage rate. So I know, okay, this number of miles times the mileage rate. And the nifty thing is, when that mileage rate changes, I don't have to go back, find all the places I used in the formulas. I only have to change it once in the one named cell, and that change will populate itself throughout the entire spreadsheet. Like if we're looking at date ranges, start date, end date, we want to look at a different date range. I don't want to have to go back to each of these lines of data, you know, the different spreadsheets, and manually change it. I'm going to have one place on one sheet where I put in a named cell start, a named cell end, and I only have to change that. Or better yet, start, and I put in a date, and then the end date might be the start date plus some value, 30 days, like that. I've only got to change it there, and everything else dependent upon that named cell is automatically going to update. Pretty cool. So target district times males, and I'll just do one more over here, special ed, some product, districts equals the target district, and times, oh, and I called this spec ed. That's enough. So now, since these are all referring back to this group over here, if I change this, I want Aztec, all my formulas update. Central consolidate, they all update. So I basically built a little calculator here where I can say, I don't want to know everything, I want to know this one, right? When I build it this way with a named range for the list, data validation that reads that list, and all the formulas that read that cell, I can very quickly answer some pretty complex questions about the case in question, in this case, the district, right? And it makes it very, very simple. The nice thing about doing this, as opposed to the whole spreadsheet, you save a lot of time, because in most cases, you're not trying to find out a lot. You're not looking for a lot of information. You're looking for information about a very specific question, right? And you kind of don't care about all of the other data that are not relevant to that question. So we can build a little calculator, a little process like this that says, what is the specific case? What is a specific element that's under study? And just give me the information I want about that particular case. It makes the whole process very, very simple. So that's the upscale or the expanded use of named ranges, count if and ifs, some products. We didn't actually have to do average ifs here. We could do that also, like the average number of students in just the private schools. What's the average count versus, and we can do a second line versus private school, for example. So there's more that we could do, but the point is we're trying to get a lot of information, narrow it down pretty much instantaneously to be able to answer a single question. And these are the types of hacks, these are the types of techniques that make it very simple, very correct, very efficient, and very easy to understand. So I hope that you have found this valuable. A couple of things though, just two quick follow-ups. One, of course, if you want to know more about naming ranges and some product and so forth, make sure you check out the other video on our website. It's also on our YouTube page under David Bowman, REC1, New Mexico. And frankly, good luck looking for anything on YouTube. Whenever I do, I always end up with Lady Gaga walking her dog or something like that. But they're on our website. So that's good. The second follow-up is that one question that often arises is, what happens if the number of lines of data changes? You're looking at student data, and from your 40-day count to your 80-day count, it's a different number of lines of data because you have different numbers of students. What happens? And there's a way to make your named ranges automatically adjust to the correct number of lines of data. So if you add more and you want to make sure that they're included in the analysis, the named range has to expand to include them. And there's a way to do it automatically. So there's another video that's getting posted, which is specifically about that problem. I actually was addressing it this morning, and it took a bit of time, but there's a way to do it so that you never have to go back and manually change your ranges again. It'll automatically adjust. The third thing to know is that you're always welcome to just contact me. If you've got a question, hey, I'm trying to do this, and I'm not sure how to do it, or I want to know more about that particular process, or can you walk me through lists again or something, right? Whatever it is, you are more than welcome to contact me. Send me an email, or send an email where you got the Zoom link today. And we can set up a little time, and I'd be happy to answer questions, walk you through, provide a little follow-up, whatever the case may be. We are here to serve. So that's it for today. Thank you all very much. I hope you found this valuable. We did kind of a race through some top things, but once you begin to master them, I'm 100% confident that you're going to find them fairly simple to use. Most importantly, you're going to be able to start pulling out some valuable information from your student data and other data forms as well. So thank you very much. Again, I'm David Bowman with the Four Corners Regional Education Cooperative #1, and I hope you have a great day.